I'm gonna tell you, had another rough day on Capitol Hill, that dumbass Linda McMahon. Y'all know she the education secretary. Her ass came from WWE. This is what happens when you get a wrestling person and you put their ass over the education department. So she got her ass lit up today in the House Education and Workforce Committee when Congresswoman Summer Lee of Pennsylvania lit her ass up on the crackdown of so-called illegal DEI programs. Roll this shit.
I think that in very many ways we've been talking around a lot of the issues with this administration. So to be honest and to be very clear, I want to say that this administration has undoubtedly revived the culture of racism we haven't seen since the Jim Crow era. They've made it clear that open attacks on Black and brown and other marginalized communities is not just tolerated, but it's encouraged. So when they call for removing of equity and inclusion and diversity and accessibility from schools in favor of quote unquote traditional American values, it's indistinguishable from post-Civil War South advocating to rewrite history with the lost cause narrative to censor truths about slavery, or as they disappear students who write dissenting op-eds. It's reminiscent of the suppression of abolitionist newspapers. And this department's financial aid policies harken back to a time when higher education was reserved for affluent, well-connected, and predominantly white students. So I have some questions, about why this department is taking its leads from Jim Crow. Secretary McMahon, you've claimed that you want to drastically reduce the already very small federal role in education, and also that you will not cut Title I-A funding. That is still your position, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. I'd like a yes or no answer. Do you believe your April 3rd attempt to revoke Title I-A funding from states unless they signed a certification of compliance with your political viewpoint was consistent with giving states more control over education?
There's been no reduction in funding for Title I-A.
As of now. There has not been yet. But again.
And it is not going forward in the budget.
So you believe that okay. Yes or no, is Title I-A funding actually secure for every school district and state that currently receives it? Or is your goal to make Title I-A conditional on states refusing to provide students of color, LGBTQA students with disabilities, or other marginalized students opportunities to participate in diverse, inclusive, equitable, and accessible learning environments?
No, that's what I answered. I-A funding is intact.
Okay. So let's talk about so-called illegal DEI, as you all have called it, a phrase you've continually bring up, that I'm still unclear on, especially after 3 federal judges have preliminarily ruled that your illegal DEI guidance is likely unconstitutional and unenforceable, illegal, as it were. Secretary McMahon, during your confirmation hearing, you were asked by Senator Chris Murphy if an African-American history class violated the administration's position on diversity, equity, and inclusion. You said you'd like to look into it. You've been on the job for a few months now. Have you been able to look into it?
I do not think that African studies or Middle East studies or Chinese studies are part of DEI if they are taught as part of the total history package. So that if you're giving the facts on both sides, of course they're not DEI.
I don't know what both sides of African-American history would be.
Well, if African-American history is part of
certainly,
history,
but what we recognize throughout education is that a course is only 1 year or 1 semester. It would be impossible to teach African history and say European history at the same time. Do you not agree that it makes sense that there would be separate courses for these courses of study? It has happened throughout history. We're able to do it not just in history courses. We're able to do it with different types of literature courses or different types of music courses. One wouldn't learn about Baroque music and necessarily have to also learn about African drumming at the same time, right? We can separate those courses.
Yes, we can. And I think just as we teach U.S. history as a separate course.
Certainly. So you do not agree. So you do agree that African-American cultures and African history should not be eliminated from courses, particularly AP African history?
Well, I think that African history can certainly be taught and not be considered a DEI course.
Oh, thank you. I have a few other examples that I would like your thoughts on, simple yes or no. If this is a legal DEI, an example, would you say that it would be an illegal DEI for a lesson plan on the Tulsa Race Massacre?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Do you know what the Tulsa Race Massacre is?
I'd like to look into it more and get back to you on it.
Okay, so I look forward to that. How about the book Through My Eyes by Ruby Bridges, for instance?
I haven't read that.
Have you learned about Ruby Bridges?
If you have specific examples you'd like
that was a specific example.
I'll be very happy.
It was an incredibly specific example. I named a specific
your questions, and I will look into it and get back to you on them.
Thank you. How about a school having a voluntary celebration for Pride Month?
Well, I think that...
voluntary.
Well, let's make sure that in our schools,
This is yes or no?
we're looking. No, it's not.
Okay. How about social studies standards that teach that President Biden won the 2020 election?
I think our studies should all be taught accurately.
Yes or no?
I think our studies should
No.
be taught
The
accurately.
question was, do you believe that social studies standards that teach that President Biden won the 2020 election is an illegal DEI? Yes or no?
I think I have said we should teach accurately. We should.
No,
be
you have
on
not
all sides.
answered the question.
Well,
I
am
don't
answering the
understand
question.
why you're incapable
I'm
of
just
answering.
not giving you the answer you want.
No,
but
I want
answering
the answer,
questions.
whatever your answer is.
I just gave you the answer.
No, the answer is yes or no.
No, the answer is I think
The
our
answer is yes
courses
or
should be
no.
taught accurately.
Gentleladies,
Thank you so
time
much.
is-
I yield back.
Yeah, damn well, she don't know who the Ruby Bridges is. She don't know about Tulsa. Her little illiterate ass. But it got better. Then Congresswoman Jahana Hayes of Connecticut wanted in on the fun. And mind y'all, Jahana Hayes is a former teacher, National Teacher of the Year. Roll that shit.
It's interesting. I took a lot of notes. I had prepared questions, but I think I'm going in a very different direction. We've heard other colleagues talk about the NAEP scores, and I heard you say that the president was angered and embarrassed by these, and I think we all should be. But when you disaggregate those scores, they clearly show that low-income students score significantly lower than their white and higher-income peers, and that is mostly in part to ongoing disparities in educational access and quality, which makes much of what I'm hearing today that much more relevant. You mentioned Connecticut. We both come from the state of Connecticut. Connecticut relies on property taxes to fund education. And we have one of the largest income gaps in the nation, which means by design or default, low-income students face multiple challenges, including limited access to resources and opportunities outside of schools, which is why I don't understand many of the decisions made in this budget. One of my colleagues asked about collecting data on family composition and background. The Department of Education Office of Civil Rights is mandated by law to do that. I was pleased to hear you say that states do not, the Department of Education does not control curriculum, instructional materials, the teachers that are hired, which makes your words contradictory because every argument you have is to put local control back into the states. But states already have local control, as anyone who has any knowledge or background of education would already know. The role of the Department of Education would be the civil rights enforcement of those local controls, which again, the irony of this budget zeroing out American history and civic education programs when you couldn't even answer a question about Ruby Bridges or the election of President Biden, which are as basic as it gets. So I really, really don't understand it. But you are making the argument for me because when you respond to questions from my colleagues by saying that sounds like an issue for state legislatures, that is why the Office of Civil Rights is necessary, because state legislatures made the decision that Ruby Bridges did not have the right to a free and appropriate, high-quality public education. So you, Madam Secretary, are actually making the argument for the role of the department, not to dictate local curriculum instruction or instructional materials, but to make sure that those things are carried out by the department. That states follow the law, that they are doing those things. So 49 million children in this country receive public education services. About 3 million children are in charter schools. There are not enough charter school slots. So my questions are mainly focused on what about those other 46 million children? So it's mind-blowing. I hear you talk about safety, keeping students safe on school campuses, but not a word about the 390,000 students who have been affected by gun violence. I was in the classroom on the day Sandy Hook happened, and the federal government came in with almost $2 million to rebuild that community and provide programs for the surrounding communities. In your opening, I heard you mention student athletes and LGBTQ students twice, not one word. And even when my colleague asked you if you thought it was a public health crisis, you can't answer questions that affect the majority of students. So I'm not really sure. I try to I am an educator by nature. I try to be supportive of what the Department of Education does because I need for you to succeed, for my students to succeed. But when you come in and say your final mission is to eliminate the department, it says to me that the 46 million children that are not receiving services do not matter. I've ran out most of my time, but this bill defunds literacy programs, eliminates 21st Century Community Learning Center, eliminates preschool grants for children with disabilities, eliminates, reduces funding for career and technical education, like all of these things. I'm going to ask you two really quick questions. Do you think that Holocaust education in our schools is a DEI program? There's no card for that. That's just yes or no.
I can look at whatever card I
Holocaust
choose.
education,
Thank
is
you
it a
very
DEI?
much.
You can have a press conference to say whatever you want. I just need a quick answer to
Your
this.
soliloquy
Is
been very
Holocaust,
informative.
because this is my time, is Holocaust education a DEI program?
No.
Is African American Studies a DEI program?
I think I answered that with one
I'm
of the
asking
other
it again.
callers. Listen, we should be
Just
able,
yes or no?
we should be able to teach courses
My
in their
point is they
entirety.
are DEI programs, both of them, because students need diversity, equity, and inclusion to understand their environments. So both Holocaust education and the teaching of African American history are important, which is why the state of Connecticut requires it in our social studies curriculum. You're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You can't support one without supporting the other. And looking at what happens in the schools and actually deferring to teachers, parents who are on curriculum committees, local boards of education in states who actually do the hard work,
The gentlelady's
and
time
listening
has
to what
expired.
they say
I appreciate
would be
the
incredibly helpful in
passion,
this
but
role.
it's time to move on.
I yield back.
I recognize.
Heck, if this was the early 90s, somebody got ethered. Zachary?
Roland, that I am a proud educator, and I'm so proud of Representative Hayes. That was a beautiful breakdown, and not only it was a beautiful breakdown, it was an amazing case for why diversity, equity, and inclusion is a cornerstone of American education, so that all students have windows into other worlds and mirrors to look back at themselves. I'm sitting here still kind of like speechless at how beautiful Representative Hayes made that case. And also a little bit dumbfounded that our Secretary of Education was a little bit dumbfounded too in what she does not know and what information, knowledge she isn't carrying within herself. Had she perhaps had a more well-rounded education, she would know about Ruby Bridges. If she perhaps had a more well-rounded education that included Black, brown people, that included the true information about Nazism and the Holocaust and Holocaust survivors, maybe she would have been able to answer some of those questions that were presented, and she would know about Tulsa and Greenwood and the atrocities that have happened to American citizens on American soil that don't look like her and that don't come from her socioeconomic class and that don't come from her economic background.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, the sad part is that we're dealing with an educational system that we're going to have to deal with over the next 15 years. What she does over the next 4 years is going to have such a huge reverb for the next generation that it's just mind-blowing. And the fact that she gets up there and she doesn't even really have much of a history lesson before, right? No one can pass her a note card and say, oh, Ruby Bridges, you remember, desegregation. I mean, the gall that she's going into these meetings unprepared, and it's just okay, because that's what we're expecting from this administration and all of the heads of these agencies, is to go into these meetings in Congress and to have absolutely no idea, to fall back on, well, I'll get back to you, I'm going back to you later, and we'll figure it out. We never get back to them, we never get an answer, and then we're asked a very simple question, and who won the 2020 election, and there's not even a direct answer to that. That's the type of administration that we're dealing with.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you.
The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.